I'm Melissa Lane, and welcome to the LifeKraft podcast. LifeKraft is passionate about helping you live your everyday life better by sharing inspiration, awareness, and tools to enable you to create a fulfilling life. On this episode of the LifeKraft podcast, we have Leah Sefor. Leah is an author, life and relationship coach, and straight-talking speaker who helps people wake up to their ability to have an authentic life. In this episode, we talk about communicating effectively, people-pleasing, and how to start living more authentically, parenting, motherhood, and how to set healthy boundaries in relationships. Are you ready to be inspired? Then tag at the LifeKraft and at leah.sefor and share a screenshot of yourself listening to this episode with us. We'd love to know what inspired you or what your biggest takeaway was from this episode. Leah, thank you so much for being on the LifeKraft podcast. It's an honor to have you here, and I can't wait for our community to get to know you better, your offerings, as well as your own podcast. I know that they would love everything that you're about. It's so relevant and it's so needed. So thank you for being here today.
Well, thanks for having me. I'm really, I love, the work that you do as well. I think you make a massive difference, and I'm loving that we're connecting today. It's about time.
Yes, absolutely. So let's get started. I would love for our audience to get to know you a little bit better. If you could share a little bit about your life growing up and how that led you to become such a successful life coach and relationship expert.
So I guess you could say I've got this work in my blood. My parents were pioneers in the field of personal development workshops and seminars in South Africa in the 80s. So they brought a lot of international stuff to this country. So I literally grew up in a home with a family that did this work in the world. And this was long before it was even called what we now call coaching. It was always just, personal development, transformational work. So I had a family that was very awake to this kind of work in the world, always doing workshops, courses, meeting with interesting teachers coming from overseas. And I was very, very, very lucky to have been exposed to that from an exceptionally young age. So growing up with this work, it became second nature. And my first foray was actually body work. I was actually a body worker for a very long time, massage and reflexology and Reiki and aromatherapy. And that was really,
lovely.
That was my initial career, was doing hands-on body work with people and energy work with people and metaphysical work and understanding how all of the stuff impacts us at a physical level. And so much of that stuff is unconscious, and we're not aware why we carry what we carry in our physical bodies. And I think through I was doing the coaching throughout that whole time as well, and went and did all my qualifications in coaching in alignment with the body work, which was such a great coupling of the work of doing the physical stuff with the emotional and the mental stuff. But then it got to a point after a long time that my hands just couldn't do the physical massage anymore. And for my physical health, I had to stop my massage practice, which was really hard because I absolutely loved doing that. And I became full-time into coaching. So I think what people don't do is communicate with their bodies. People are very disconnected from their bodies. They don't listen to their bodies. People tend to treat their bodies like it's this vessel I live in. I've got to get through a day. I'm just going to throw some food down my throat, give myself some energy, and hope we survive. It's this total disconnect.
Oh my goodness.
Which you totally know because this is your work in the world, So communication, I know people think communication is talking, but communication operates on so many levels, and the lack of proper communication, one of my favorite body modalities is body talk, and how body alignment technique and how your body knows exactly what it wants, exactly what it needs. We just don't listen to it. And I think that's the first really important part of communication is where you are with yourself. Communication, how do you speak to yourself? What wording do you use to describe yourself? What is that internal dialogue that is going on with yourself? And do you actually listen to your body? When, your body, not only just the physical issues, like, do you keep ignoring that pain in your hip? Do you keep ignoring that weird digestive thing that you've got? Do you keep ignoring that headache that you have every day? Your body is not supposed to be in pain ever. So when your body is in that state and it's sending you the signals, are you really listening to it? No. Well, I think that's quite indicative of the kind of lack of listening you do elsewhere in your life, So it starts really with you and your physical body. And I think my work as a body therapist is what naturally moved me into my coaching is life coaching. But communication specifically became a field I was really fascinated with, as is relationships, because the same thing. What is your relationship with yourself and therefore with other people? So that kind of became the transition from body work into coach, into communication and relationships.
What a life. And I think it's so relevant because your book that I need to get my hands on, that's not what I meant. A smart, savvy guide to real communication. I mean, that title is everything. And I don't think we always understand that we are sensory beings. So we're actually communicating with the environment we're in so many different ways all the time. And just because you, like I learned a couple of years ago, I talk a lot and I talk fairly easily with people, but that doesn't mean that I communicate well. So what would you define as communicating effectively, firstly with yourself and then with others?
It's a big question, and there's no simple answer to that. Communicating effectively is, are you getting your message across and are you hearing what is being said to you? And our emotions are extremely big. How do you translate your emotions into thoughts and then into words? And in that translation process, a lot gets lost in translation. So you feel this huge amount, and then you want to sit with your partner, or you want to sit with your boss, or sit with a family member to try and explain to them what this feeling is that's going on with you. And you just can't get it out. You just can't say, this is what is not working for me. This is why it is not working for me. This is the behavior you engage in that triggers me. This is where I'm at and why I react the way that I do. I understand that there's something else going on here. So let's look at how we can talk without being reactive, without triggering each other, without leading this into some conflict situation. That we both want a solution here. Yes, we both have to hear stuff we don't want to hear. We have to be open to hearing that constructive criticism. But it's because we want to win with each other and we want to grow with each other. So effective communication is getting as close to your internal truth as possible so that the other person facing you can truly get where you're coming from.
That's brilliant. You talk a lot about being real and being authentic. In your own life, what was the shift? Because I know a lot of times we grow up with societal pressure and family pressure, and we kind of build our little personality and our personal realities around what people expect us to be, what will keep us safe, and what will make us survive in the environment that we're in. What was a moment in your life where you decided, I am going to be real, I am going to be Leah, the real one, and I'm going to be authentic, and this is just going to be how it is?
I don't know that there was one moment. I think it was a collection of different experiences and moments growing up. And I think, like you say, when you're discovering your social self, and that's going way into your 20s, people think you're done when you're 18. You're not. Your brain hasn't even finished developing until you're about 22, 23. And you're still figuring out who you are in your 20s. And for a lot of people, that figuring out really comes down to relationships and boundaries. People don't know how to put boundaries in place with toxic partners, with unhealthy relationships. And that was me. I had a very toxic relationship that where boundaries were just violated all the time. And it took many years for me to be able to step back and go, this is a line that I have to now draw in the sand for myself. So I see this with everybody that I work with in that age group, is that relationship boundaries are really hard when you're younger, because you don't know what they look like. You don't know that you can say no. You don't know what gaslighting means. You don't know what toxic behavior is because you don't have the experience of it. So I would say that, early relationships were a big moment for me to feel the disconnect within myself, because I was trying to please the other person so much and be who they wanted me to be. And I wasn't happy with who I was or any experience of that whatsoever. So the relationship side of things was a big aha for me going through that. I think work is another very big one for me. I worked in corporate a lot, in amongst my body work. I did a good, 10 years in corporate, very big corporate. And I did that in South Africa. I did that in London. I worked in a big corporate in London. And I think the real thing for me, that was the best education that I had, because the total manipulation that goes on in a work environment is quite something to behold.
Yeah. And especially if you have a little bit of awareness, then it's quite interesting to see. Yeah,
it's scary, and you think you've had this effective communication, and then they go and do something else in a meeting, or they throw you under the bus, or they backstab you to get the account, or it was like, what is going on here? It was a bit like the Hunger Games. So work life was, is it worth compromising what is morally and ethically right for me for a paycheck? And that was a big one for me with corporate, is that, and I see it with almost everybody I work with who works in corporate, is like, what are you having to compromise with your morals and your ethics for a monthly paycheck?
Yeah.
And I saw, once there was a great quote once that said, the three biggest addictions in the world are sugar, heroin, and a monthly paycheck. I just see people sell themselves out completely for the money at the end of the month. And I was one of them, I had to leave the corporate world. That was a big moment for me, of realizing that in order to be in this world, I would have to play a role that goes against everything I stand for and everything I feel that I am. There is nothing real. It is mask after mask after mask. And it's not a reality that I'm choosing to be in. So I left corporate earning really good money and became a waitress.
Wow.
To get by, because the company I was with, it was a really huge what's the word I'm looking for? It was a very controversial company that closed down, and I had to get a job as a waitress, which I loved. For me, there's a lot of reality in that. I've been a waitress quite a lot in my life, and it's good, honest, real, great work, and you get to meet cool people every day, and there's no faking it. And I just felt like I had to ground myself a bit after that corporate. And then I went back to my body work. My body work was always my thing, and into my coaching. So I'd say that was the next big step of me looking at what was real for me in the terms of the workplace. And I think the biggest transition for me into dropping the bullshit was becoming a mother.
Wow.
And I speak about this in one of my videos on my YouTube channel, about what it took for me to get real. And the big thing was sitting in these moms and baby groups, when my daughter was born, and I felt like a train wreck. I had postnatal depression. I was a total wreck. I'd go for 2 days without bathing. I had baby puke on my shoulder. Like, I was just a train wreck. Like, what mother isn't, quite honestly? And I remember going to my first moms and babies group, and I walked in. I thought I'd walked onto a set of the Stepford Wives.
No.
Like, every woman in that room was beautifully dressed. Their hair was blow dried. Makeup was done. Nails were lovely. All their babies were sleeping. I was like, what is going on? And then you feel shitter about yourself, because you think, oh, well, they've all got it right, so I'm doing something wrong. And I sat in that group, and the lady started with a woman on my left, and she said, how are you doing, and what's going on with you? And this voice came out of her that was just singing the praises of motherhood and how wonderful it was, and she's never felt love like this before, and her baby's just sleeping through the night. I mean, I looked at this woman like she was speaking some foreign language, and I just stayed very quiet. And then it went to the next woman, who said almost the same thing, and the next woman. And, the whole group went like this. For every woman, it was this blissful, beautiful, wonderful, connecting experience. And it came to me, and I said, well, I don't know what you guys are going through. I can't relate, because I'm hating every single moment of this. I'm terrified all the time. I'm scared all the time. I don't really actually feel bonded with my child. Breastfeeding is a complete and total nightmare. I hate my partner. I want to stab him in the eye with a fork. I'm not sleeping. Like, I feel like I'm completely falling apart.
Sure.
To which the one on my left went, oh, thank God somebody said it. Yeah, no, me too. I'm feeling exactly the same way. And and then the whole group, like dominoes, went down, and all of them, like, yeah, no, me too, me too. I'm actually on antidepressants at the moment, and my child's not sleeping through it. It was like suddenly the bullshit stopped. And I said to them, I said, I don't know what we are doing here. This is supposed to be a support space for new moms who are completely broken to come and find holding and safety. And all any of you was interested in today was putting on this act of being this perfect mother. For who? For what? I never went back. I was like, if this is what support looks like, I don't want it. Thank you. And it just that was scary. And I see a lot of moms going through this, like needing to be the perfect mother and the perfect wife and get your body back as quickly as you can and lose the baby weight as quickly as you can. And it's just this insane way we forced, especially women, to conform into some ideal, which is all crap.
Yes.
So that for me was like the final straw that broke the camel's back.
That is brilliant. And I think people don't speak about it enough. And I know our generation is starting to speak out about it, but it seems like a taboo to speak up against motherhood or to say that I'm not enjoying this. And I'm not a parent myself, but I coach a lot of women who the thing that keeps them from having that happy, healthy mindset is the fact that they're going through these things in motherhood and they can't speak about it because it's still a taboo. And I love that you're just cutting through the bullshit with that.
Yeah. No, and it is bullshit. And, you know, look, the reason I think it stays taboo is that we've got to also look at the generational stuff that comes through with mothering and parenting. And each generation before us had like their own way. So our parents' generation and our grandparents' generation is definitely a generation of like, you don't air your dirty laundry. There's no such thing as therapy. There's no such thing as divorce. You deal with your own stuff privately and suck it up, sunshine. Like if something is not okay, tough. And it's that it was a very tough Victorian mentality, like, you know, that generation of, it was wartime mentality. We don't have time to be sensitive and be vulnerable and have feelings about things. And then they're the ones who are parenting the next generation down. And when their children are having babies, they're the ones saying, well, you know, toughen it out and suck it up. And yes, it's hard, but get on with it. And so we will model what we are shown in parenting. And even, you know, in my parents' generation, I mean, I had very woke parents, if you want to say, who didn't play that game. But for like a lot of my closest friends had that from their mothers saying to them, well, you know, yes, it's tough, but so what? Get on with it. And it's a way mothers need someone to say, give them permission to say, it's like, it's not okay. It is hard. You're allowed to get help. You're allowed to reach out. You don't have to have this all figured out. They just need someone to make them feel like it's okay. Like I hated breastfeeding with a passion. It was painful. I got infections. She wasn't getting enough milk, but I called them the breastfeeding Nazis because I couldn't find a single person from my midwife to the people in my baby group who were bottle feeding. Everybody was breastfeeding. And it was like, you just need to wait it out because breast is best and it's better for your baby. And like bottles are terrible. And this guilt for women who want to go into bottle feeding with their babies. And I just felt completely isolated and alone. Like I needed somebody's permission to say it's okay because no one knows what the hell they're doing when they become a mother. And, you know, the person who gave me permission was my gynae.
Wow.
Who was in his 70s. He was of a different generation. And he's the one that said to me, like, what are you doing? Like, no one is going to give you an award for breastfeeding mother of the year. Like, you are infected. She's not getting enough milk. She's not picking up weight. You're crying all the time. Like, what point are you trying to prove? And I was like, how interesting that the only one who was okay with that was a man.
Wow.
Who said to me, like, just stop the crap. Because all the women in my life were putting the guilt going, no, you have to carry on breastfeeding. So we have to look at this generational thing of why women feel they can't be vulnerable or say, like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. It's really crippling. So yes, I agree with you that this generation is a lot more conscious and a lot more awake. And there's a lot more help in terms of podcasts and Instagram and groups online that you can join.
And it's so funny because I grew up with a parent with that mentality. That was the go-to, and I was always too sensitive. And now I know I wasn't too sensitive. My life really just sucked, and I was picking it up, and I was aware. So I always have compassion with people when someone just says, "No, you're just really sensitive," and then I'm like, sometimes life is just really hard, and you're allowed to voice that. But it's a funny thing. I grew up in a girls' school as well. So I was surrounded with women, single parent child, just a mom, woman energy all the time. And I really noticed that we are not okay with vulnerability. We do shame ourselves and each other the entire time. And guilt is a big, big factor for women till this day. With all of the wokeness and with all of the information, we still have that guilt even when we're trying to change. So what advice would you give a woman who's listening to this and saying, yes, I want to cut through the bullshit. I want to just own my life, speak my truth, be authentic, but the guilt's still there. The shame's still there, the mother-in-law, the mom, the voice in the head that's still going on with the old generation's beliefs, etc., etc.
You know, firstly, you've got to look at who you're doing this for. You've really got to look at who are you doing this for? Is it your husband? Is it your mom-in-law? Is it your child? Is it for a friend? Are you competing with somebody to show that you too can do this? You know, like what is the outside expectation of you that has put you in a position of feeling you have to do what you are doing? So get very clear on that, number one. Number two is that, you know, as you'll read in the book, I talk a lot about how everybody operates from their own version of reality. So we all have filters between reality and us that determines how we personally perceive reality. But that perception and that viewpoint belongs to us and us alone. No one else on earth shares that viewpoint. So there are, you know, nearly 8 billion versions of reality on planet Earth, and none of them are the same. So you're breaking yourself, trying to mold yourself into a reality of your mom-in-law or reality of your husband that just belongs to them. It's not the reality, it's their reality. And you are compromising your truth to make it with them. Why? For what reason? To keep the peace? To make things happy? It's not happy, because nothing will ever be happy when you are selling yourself out, ever. Nothing will ever be okay when you are compromising yourself to make somebody else okay. So identify whose reality you are trying to fit into and why. And also understand that people operate with a very limited view of reality. You know, you only know what you are taught. You only know what was shown to you in the world. And our parents and grandparents and great-grandparents had very limited views of reality, because they did not have access to this wonderful thing called the internet. They, you know, the world consciousness was not where it is right now. Therapy was this weird thing, you know, it was very fringe. Nobody did that. So understand that you are far more conscious and awake than the generations that have come before you. So why are you trying to conform yourself back into a limited box of that generation when they didn't know what else to see, how else to think, until somebody else came and showed them? So instead of conforming to it, your job is now to educate them to a greater consciousness.
And how do we go about communicating that, though, Leah? How do we say that?
So let's take an example of let's say a woman is having an argument with her mother-in-law about how she's raising her child. And the mother-in-law comes to the house all the time and she imposes herself in the space, and you shouldn't be feeding your child like that, and you shouldn't be doing this with your child. It's simply to say, thank you so much for how much you care about us and wanting to show us and wanting to teach us. I really do see how much you care. And yet you've had your mothering journey. This is my mothering journey. And I've done a lot of research and a lot of investigation to find a new way that works for me. Now, I understand that this way could be scary for you and you think it's very strange because it's not what you did. But is there something in you willing to accept the fact that you were also operating from limited knowledge? And that there's been so much discovery over the last 20 years about what works for children and what doesn't work for children. There's been so much discovery over the last year, never mind. Things are constantly being evolved and updated. I constantly stay updated to that stuff. And I'd love to teach you what I'm learning. I'd love to discuss this stuff with you to maybe shift your perspective of what you think is right or wrong when it comes to child rearing, because there are different ways that are out there. So you want to find a spirit of collaboration and education when you want to communicate with somebody. However, if she or that other person is not willing to say, you're absolutely right, totally would love to do this journey with you. If they're going to stay in their space and go, yes, but no, I hear you, but you're still doing it wrong. That's when the boundaries come out. That is when you've got to say, okay, I've really tried to speak to you about how to do this in a workable way. All I get from when you come to my house is how wrong I am and how unacceptable my parenting is. And I will never allow myself to be put in a position of feeling like I'm failing as a parent. And that is all you are bringing to this space. So if you cannot bring anything else to this space, then I'm going to not allow you in my space. So that's when the boundaries come out as to, are they allowed to visit? When are they allowed to visit? What kind of conversations are they allowed to have with you? And you've got to maintain that. So reach out to start, seek to collaborate, find the win-win. But if people are just not going to respect that at all, then you need to bring out the boundaries.
That is so powerful. And I wanted to talk about boundaries because you communicated so beautifully right now. And there's always a little bit of confusion when it comes to boundaries. People misjudge boundaries for kind of being on the attack or on the defense. And boundaries aren't that at all. Yeah. It's actually a beautiful mechanism to keep you safe and to keep you real and authentic. Yeah. So would you explain to our listeners, what is a boundary and how do you set a healthy one?
Okay, so boundaries are simply the invisible barrier that teaches people how far they can come near you. So the great phrase I'd say about boundaries is the distance at which I can love you and me simultaneously. It is the space between us that allows me to have huge self-respect and to have respect for you. And if you're going to start coming a bit too close into my space and not valuing or respecting me, that is why the boundary has to be there. So first of all, we have boundaries with ourselves, and then we have boundaries with the outside world. And the boundaries with ourselves are, what are your agreements with yourself? How quickly do you break those agreements with yourself? Where do you compromise yourself, second guess yourself? How well do you know yourself? What are you clear on what your beliefs and your morals and your values and your ethics are? Are you clear about, what path you want to be walking, where you stand with yourself emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually? That's what self-work is about. Self-work is about knowing yourself so clearly that somebody else can't come along and say something that derails you.
Yes.
And when you have no boundaries and somebody else can come along and go, oh, that hairstyle is terrible on you. If you're really clear with yourself and you really specifically want a look of yourself in the world, and that's the hairstyle you chose and you love that, then honestly, that comment's not going to trigger you. You're going to go, well, great. Thanks for your opinion. I love my hair. And you're going to get on with your life. But if you are only doing that hairstyle to please somebody else, or because you think it's what you need to look like, and somebody comes along and goes, oh, that hairstyle's terrible, you're going to be a basket case. You're going to have a total breakdown, and you're going to be all in tears. And what does it mean? And I look ugly. And you're now going to internalize their opinion. Why? Because you don't have one of your own. So,
and it's that way with everything.
You've got to own. With everything, like own your own stuff, own your own shadow, own who you are in the world, because people are always going to bring their points of view and judgments. People are always going to come at you with what they think you should do, who they think you should be, how they think you should speak. They must do that. It's your choice whether you want to engage with that or not. So a boundary is teaching other people how to treat you. And how do you do that? So first of all, you've got to look at all of your life areas. So look at your personal relationship, look at your health, look at your fitness, look at how you are with money, with your parents, with your siblings, with your friends, with your journey of spirituality and faith, with your home, with the part of your life that's dedicated to adventures and exploring. Look at all the areas of your life and simply say to yourself, what is not working for me about how other people treat me in this area of my life. So what doesn't work for me about how other people treat me or speak to me in this area? That's, the clue. Then you can say, right, I recognize that my friend always actually speaks to me in a really dismissive way when we go out in public. And it actually makes me feel uncomfortable when she does that. And I need to speak to her about that. So it's identifying the behavior and who's, perpetrating the behavior of anything that's making you feel uncomfortable. Your body is the alarm that tells you a boundary is being violated. So when you feel uncomfortable, when you feel guilty, that is when a boundary is being violated. Sure. Once you've identified the person, then it's time to sit down with them and say to them, stuff's going on for me that I want to communicate to you about how I feel when you say or do ABC. And when you do it, this is how it makes me feel. It doesn't work for me. It's not something I'm okay with happening again. So moving forward and understand they're probably totally unconscious about the fact that they're doing it. People are completely unconscious about their own behavior. So it's not like people are not out there to be malicious or deliberately wreck your life. They just don't know that they're doing it. So you can say, you probably don't know that you've been speaking to me like this or behaving like this with me. It doesn't work for me. This is why it doesn't work for me. So moving forward from this moment, this is how I would like you to speak and behave with me. It's an educational process, boundaries. But here's the thing that people always miss out with boundaries. There has to be a consequence if that boundary is violated again. So this is what doesn't work. This is how I would like it to be. Moving forward, this is how I want you to speak to me and behave with me. If you do that old behavior again, the consequence is ... I won't invite you over to my home anymore. I will not be going out with you anymore. I will not be doing this business with you anymore. Or like whatever. You've got to decide what the consequence is, but you have to communicate that consequence to the person. Because people get passive aggressive with boundary setting. They set the boundary in their heads, but they don't communicate them to the other person. Then the other person has no idea what they've done wrong. They don't know why they're being cut out. They don't know why there's this sudden like heavy energy between them, because you didn't communicate that to them. And if the other person goes, oh, well, you're being so ridiculous and you're being so silly and that's such a stupid thing to have about, go, well, whatever. That's your point of view and your perspective. And if you genuinely feel that what I'm asking of you is ridiculous, then we don't have a basis for a relationship anymore. Because if you really are my friend or my family or somebody who's close to me, and I'm coming to you with my raw, vulnerable truth to say, this is what is not okay. Please treat me in a different way. And you are dissing that, dismissing it, laughing at it. Then we are just on very different frequencies at the moment and we cannot have a relationship.
Wow. And I want to ask you another question in regards to this. What if you are on the receiving end? Someone is setting a boundary with you, but you would love to honor that boundary, because I don't think people speak about this enough. And it's something you need to learn. So your partner, your friend communicates a boundary with you. You listen, you understand, you genuinely want to honor their boundary. But it's uncomfortable. It's something new. You kind of need to program your mind around. You didn't realize that it affected them in that way. Do you have any advice for someone who really wants to honor someone's boundary and not make them feel that what they said and what they communicated wasn't received well?
Yeah, it's a hard one because it's quite a shock when somebody brings the boundary to your feet. It's quite a wow, I didn't know you felt this way. I didn't know I was upsetting you this much. So whatever, if somebody comes to you, that's literally what you can say. You can say, thank you, first of all. Thank you for being brave enough to tell me the truth. Like, thank you. And I had no idea you felt like this. I had no idea that the way I was speaking or behaving was triggering you like this. I'd so love to learn more about this and really honor what you're asking me to do. So the specifics always boil down to how would you like me to speak and how would you like me to behave? So what would you like me to shift in the way that I talk, in the way that I behave, in the way that we interact together? Because people tend to be a bit general when they put a boundary in place. Like you're invasive and you don't respect my time. Okay, that's a big statement. What does that mean? When did I not respect your time? When was I invasive? So please bring specifics to the conversation. You always just arrive at my house uninvited. You always just piggyback on a date when me and my husband go out to dinner. You always, Just give specific examples so that the other person goes, oh, okay, now I know what you're talking
And can
about.
you ask for that if that person doesn't communicate it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I get this is upset. I'm not understanding. So could you just give me more detail? Like give me a specific of something that I did so I can understand. Help me to understand this better. And then if they come at you more and you still don't understand it, you can go, okay, you've said this. I'm still not understanding how it impacted you. Please tell me more about that. Like, tell me more. I want to learn. So if you're on the receiving end, just be willing to be taught what is not okay. And then, yes, there is going to be a period of discomfort because now you're on eggshells. Now, the next time you see that person, like, oh, I don't know, how must I behave? How must I? Well, yeah, you are going to be on eggshells for a while until you learn new behavior because your old behavior was habitual. It was natural. It was automatic. You didn't have to think about it. Now you're having to be conscious. And conscious is having to be aware of your behavior at all times. It's like when you first learn how to drive a car. It's scary and you've got to be very alert and you've got to be very awake and you have to do all of your checks and you've got to take it one step at a time. But over a few days and weeks, that starts becoming a lot more natural and the new behavior will find its natural place. But yeah, in the beginning, it's going to be a bit tender and sensitive.
That's beautiful. And I always think we always learn how to set a boundary, but we never learn how to honor a boundary in the beautiful way that you said it now. And I love that because I know a lot of our listeners, we want to do life better. We want to communicate better. We want to have healthy relationships, healthy family dynamics, and all of those things. So this has helped so much.
Sorry to interrupt before we carry on, because this is important. The two things here. The first thing with the boundary is that understand that by the time you're ready to set the boundary, that other person has been pissing you off for a very long time. Your boundaries have been violated for a very long time, but they don't know that. So be very aware that if you now suddenly come at them in a really aggressive way, it's because you've been building up over days, weeks, months, and they're getting like the sharp end. So just say to them, I know I'm feeling a bit heated about this, but understand I've been feeling like this for quite some time. I just haven't felt courageous enough to say something to you. So I don't want to fight and I don't want to be aggressive. I just want to express what I've been feeling. So just be aware you're managing the aggression level when you want to set a boundary. And then the second thing I want to say is that boundaries are not only about keeping out, boundaries are also about inviting in. So boundaries are not only about what you don't want, boundaries are about what you do want and asking for more. Saying to your partner, I would love it if you do more of this, if you give more of this, if you say more of this. Because when people put a boundary in place, the other person now feels they're on the other side of the fence and they don't know how to get back to you. So teach people how to come back in.
That is such a beautiful, beautiful way. I love asking for more, asking in, and having that vulnerability to also share that part of you, what you'd like to experience more of. A lot of times we don't have the courage and the authenticity and the self-trust to be able to communicate our needs and be vulnerable enough to maybe not have them met. So it's a scary thing, but I think especially when you're setting a boundary, it's such a beautiful opportunity to practice that, to say, okay, and this is what I would like from you.
Because people only focus on what they don't want. Yeah, exactly. It's not just this is what I don't want from you. Like, this is what I do want. So, I wrote a workbook about boundaries because people really struggle to identify specifics around boundaries, what action to take, how to have the difficult conversations. So if your listeners are interested, I have a workbook called The Freedom Factor. It's a download, it's an ebook, and you can get it off of my website, leahsefor.com.
And we'll put the link below as well. Yeah, so that people can get that.
Because it's a workbook.
Yeah,
like get your journal and like journal it out and think about it, because the thing with discomfort, and I'm sure you know this with the work you do, is people don't specify what their discomfort is about. They feel it. Something doesn't feel right in my life. And you go, okay, well, what's not working? I don't know.
Yes.
Okay, well, let's put it out on paper. Like, what is it? This is it? This is it? This area? Could it be this? So we have to brainstorm stuff to get the truth of why we're feeling the way that we're feeling, and that's why this is a workbook. It's not just a book to read.
I like that, and it leads so beautifully into the next question I have for you. I listened to you put all of this massive information, sometimes uncomfortable topics in such a beautiful manner. You just communicate it so eloquently. I know people, being a little extrovert myself, I've been surrounded by introverts my entire life. They gravitate towards me and I enjoy them so much. But the one thing that I always hear from them, whether it's family members or friends or relationships that are more intimate, when they have this idea that they can't communicate well, I can't speak well, I don't know how to communicate, not only what I'm feeling, but anything. So they just shut down and internalize everything, but you feel it in the energy. You feel it when you're around them. What advice do you have for someone that has that belief about themselves, except for buying your book? What piece of advice do you have for them today that they can maybe just start letting go of that belief?
For some people, it may not be a belief. For some people, it may be this very specific communication system they belong to, which makes it extremely uncomfortable for them to be in physical proximity to somebody else and then try and talk about feelings. So I'm not punting the book, but I'm saying in the book, I talk about these 4 systems. And there are 2 systems, the analyzer and the listener, that really struggle to do the eye contact, the emotional expression, these big, deep conversations. It's just not how they are built. And not everybody can communicate effectively face to face. It's not a skill everybody has. So for those systems, I would say that writing is the secret. Writing letters, writing communication, because face to face is overwhelming because there's too much sensory input. I've now got to look at your facial expression, and I've got to look at your body language, and I've got to hear the tone of your voice, and that's so overwhelming, you know. Whereas if I can just sit down and write you a letter to tell you how I'm feeling, I've got all the time that I need, because those 2 systems need time. The other 2 systems can talk drop of a hat, very quickly, very deep, very, intensely. These 2 systems can't. So saying to them, I can see something is going on for you. I can see you in a state. Please write me a letter. Tell me how you're feeling about everything. Tell me why you are in a state. Try and explain to me in the best way that you can what it feels like in you when I say or do ABC, so that I can understand more from your worldview and your perspective of what you're going through, and take as long as you need. So let them write a letter. Then they don't have to speak and they don't have to sit in front of you. It's too overwhelming. And see how that goes.
That is so powerful. That is so powerful. I see so many of the people I know and have worked with in one of those 2 categories. And it is just overwhelming for them in that moment. It's with all the energy going on, with your facial expressions, with all of the information that they're getting in that moment. And I always thought that doesn't make you a bad communicator. It might just mean that that's not the form of communication for you. And you put it so beautifully. Exactly. I have to get my hands on your book because it's going to help me so much. It's just brilliant. So that is one of the things that I definitely wanted to ask you. I wanted to ask you, what is something that you've noticed in people that holds them back from living an authentic life? What is one major thing that you see with everyone that is just that block? They've got this wanting, they're listening to the podcast today and thinking, yes, I want to be able to communicate that way. I want to be able to live that way. But it feels like something's holding me back.
I'm scared of what people are going to think. I'm scared of what people are going to think. What are people going to think? Always. It's 2 things, it's desperately wanting to please people. Like, I don't want to let people down. And, what are they going to think? If I go and dye my hair purple, what is my boss going to think? If I just suddenly, if I come out the closet and tell my family I'm gay, what are they going to think? Am I going to let them down because I'm now not going to have children? It's just the underlying thing for everybody of who am I going to let down and what are people going to say? Well, guess what? People are going to say stuff, because people are going to operate from their worldview and they're going to be offended and they're going to have their judgment. I'm like, so what? So what? Let them. You have no power to control how other people see you, how other people speak about you. It's just beyond your realm of control. So you've got 2 options. One is that you can keep yourself small so that nobody notices you and speaks about you, or you can explode into the world. Well, everybody will notice you and speak about you. And guess what? Nobody's going to die. Life will carry on.
Absolutely.
And if their lives are so utterly boring that they've got nothing else to talk about other than you, like, how wonderful that you gave them some topics to talk about, because their lives are so uninspired. So
yes.
Seriously, like, you have to understand that somebody out there is waiting for you to do that thing. Somebody else out there, their life is going to be changed by something you do or something you say. And if we have the power to just help somebody shift their life, just one person, that is how we shift this planet. That is how we shift the consciousness of this world. People are too obsessed with trying to impact everybody. Wow. Especially if you have an Instagram page, if you have a Facebook page, if you create a podcast, if you do videos, if you are a content creator, stop being so obsessed with everyone. Focus on a message that just for that day could change one person's life. And if that's all you're reaching, I can guarantee you it's profound and it's enough. So stop being so afraid of, there are a lot of people are not going to like you. A lot of people hate me. A lot of people think I'm too intense and I'm too hectic and I'm too abrasive. Well, then they're not my tribe. They're not my tribe, and that's totally okay. It's really okay. They must go and find their tribe that they resonate with. There's no hard feelings, but I'm sure as hell not going to start conforming or molding myself to become something that tribe thinks is acceptable. No, thank you. Not happening.
And I just want to add this as well. In my own, I was like a chronic people pleaser. And I just want to add that everyone listening to this, the breakthrough moment for me was when someone told me that my people pleasing was my attempt to control people as well. Yeah, because I couldn't sit with the discomfort of them not being happy with me. So I had to go and do the inner work there. So just remember that it's not just about that person being so controlling and that person demanding this of you. Sometimes you're a people pleaser because you are trying to control their emotional state too, so that you feel regulated and safe. So it's on you as well. Yeah. And then next up, it's just the biggest thing. It just shook me out of that. And the fact that when people don't accept you as you are, it might be one sting. That is not your tribe. That's not your person. That's not the relationship to have now. But if you keep trying to please everyone in your life, it is draining your life force energy in a way that you can't imagine, especially if you grew up in that. So it might feel like hard work now to learn to set up boundaries, to learn how to communicate effectively, to learn how to get to know yourself, doing the journaling work, doing the inner work. But when you get to that point where it starts becoming automatic, you'll have so much more energy. You'll literally feel how much of your day was taken up by thinking about, what did that person think? What do they think about me? How am I going to please that person? Etc., etc. So it's freeing. It might seem like a big change, but it's actually going to set you free in ways you can't imagine.
And the journey to that freedom is an uncomfortable one. So I want to say to your listeners, please get comfortable with being uncomfortable. You cannot bypass the discomfort to get the freedom. It's going to be hard because you are breaking a version of yourself. You are surrendering and walking away from a version of yourself that you have been in since you were born. So when you are so uncomfortable suppressing your truth, that the day comes when you have to put that boundary in place and say, I can no longer be in your life, or you can no longer be in my life, whether it's family or friends, it's you are saying goodbye to a version you have been for a very long time. In that, there is going to be a process of grief. And I just want to warn listeners, because I don't want to sugarcoat this. I don't want to say that the journey of personal enlightenment and transformation is fun and easy and rainbows and unicorns. It's not. It is dark night of the soul stuff. It is a dismantling of everything you have known yourself to be. It is putting yourself back together again as who you want to be. It's a period of a complete exposure and rawness, transforming and walking away from that does not serve you. So yes, people are going to disapprove. Okay, feel that in your body. Let your ego have a moment, have that feeling, but don't attach to it. Observe it, feel it, see if there's any lesson for you in it, and then let it go. So say what you need to say.
Yes.
Other people are fully and completely entitled to have their reactions. You can't manage that. If the reaction is really hectic, all you can simply say is, I can see that you need some time to process what I've just said. I'm going to give you some space. And when you've dealt with that, we can maybe have a conversation a few days' time. But don't become the punch bag. So you want to put the boundary in place, or you want to walk away from a group, a person, an environment that is no longer serving you. They have benefited from your lack of boundaries. They have benefited from you being small. So what do you think is going to happen when you decide to step fully into your power and go, I'm out of here, thank you, bye? Of course they're going to have a reaction. So what? Leave them to it. Let them have their reaction. Get on with your life. And if they don't like you, so what?
Yes.
If you've disappointed them, so what? Like rather them than you. Like you come first in your own life. So you're absolutely right. That liberation of claiming yourself is so utterly profound. But the journey to getting there can be hard, but worth it. Worth it every step of the way.
The journey can be so hard. It's so worth it. And your whole explanation took me back to about 7 years ago when I went through that total dismantling of everything that I was and knew. I had a little quarter life crisis, moved, quit my job, moved to a small town, just decided that I want to live and I want to figure this thing out and I want to do it. And I always tell people, you don't need to do it as dramatically as I did it, but when you start on that journey, you are going to lose a sense of you. You are going to lose a bit of your identity. And that is good because it's the strangest thing as human beings. We want to have a different experience, but we don't want change. And it's the strangest thing. So what advice do you have for people when they might be in the thick of it now, in that dark night of the soul, in that, God, I am so far away from where I want to be, but I'm not the same person that I was a year or two ago. They're just in the middle of that transformation journey.
It's quite a beautiful place to be, that limbo, if you're willing to surrender to it. And I think that we live in a society where we always have to be seen to be in action, accomplishing, getting results, having an outcome. No, if you are properly in that limbo and you're properly in that in between, then be there. Stop resisting where you are. If everything you are trying isn't working, if what you are attempting to do keeps crashing, your universe, the universe, is exceptionally clear in its messaging. When something becomes effort and struggle, it is not your path. When it flows and it's easy, that is your path. But moments of rest between life phases are incredibly necessary. And I said that earlier about that period of grief and that period of mourning, of letting go of the life that was before you step into the life that will be, that you've got to honor that space of nothingness, of that space of, don't be afraid. Like, people are scared to take a day off and stay in bed. People are scared to just go and sit in the garden for an hour and have your tea. People feel guilty because they are not constantly busy and constantly doing, and like, for who, for what? Like, I think this whole pandemic in the very beginning was such a exhale for everybody to be able to just stay at home and not be in a car and not be in traffic and not go to work and not have to do the 9 to 5. And it was such an aha moment for people that they actually have the right to structure their lives how they want it to be, that they had to get over this guilt of like not doing all the time. So my advice to people in that space is learn the art of being, not doing. Just be where you are. You are in a chrysalis state. You are cocooned. You are becoming. But when the moment is right, you will emerge. The moment's not right yet, then you need to stay where you are. So patience and time is needed.
That is beautiful. What advice would you give 20-year-old Leah today?
That's a really good question. 20 years old, I was so worried about looking good. I was so worried about looking good for my boyfriend, for my friends. You know, you're on the hunt when you're in your 20s, you're dating when you're in your 20s, you're obsessed about your body, you're obsessed about your eating, you're obsessed about looking good and stuff. And it was such an obsession that I attracted the wrong people into my life because of it, because that's all they saw and that's all that they got attracted to. And then I felt empty because there was nothing deeper going on there. And that I spent so much energy on one version of myself, of how I looked in the world, that everything else kind of atrophied, you know, everything else went to sleep. And it was a long journey to reclaim myself once I kind of got out of that. So there's so much more to you than this physical stuff. And if you are stuck in this physical need to look a particular way and be present in the world in a particular way, you've got to look at why. And if you're more obsessed with, you know, putting your Instagram posts out there and how you look on an Instagram post and structuring a version of your life that physically looks good, but isn't who you really are or how you are really feeling, then take the app off your phone. Say goodbye to being in the world in a physical way and just be with you. Like if you need that little red heart on a post to feel good about yourself, you are on the wrong path and you need to end that right now. So to my 20-year-old self, I would have said, stop looking good all the time. It's not going to get you anywhere.
It's not. And it's not health, and it's not happiness, and it's not fulfillment. It's one tiny speck of the multitude of facets of who you are, and you're so much more interesting than that. That is such a beautiful answer. Leah, I could speak to you for ages. You are a phenomenal woman, and I just want to take a moment to acknowledge you before the last question, because growing up how you have, you still had to make decisions in your life, to do the hard work, to go through your own dark night of the soul, to break down those facets that you built up for years, and just to expose yourself to people and say, you know what, people need help. People need to learn how to communicate, how to love better, how to be more authentic, how to just be in this crazy complex world. And you do it with so much flair and you do it with so much vibrancy. And I absolutely love your no bullshit approach. We need more of that.
Thank you.
So I want to acknowledge you for doing your hard work so that we can look at you and say, I recognize something about me in her, because we can't be what we've never seen. So thank you for that.
Oh, thank you. That is so incredibly beautiful of you. And you know, it's just so necessary that you are in the world the way you are, using the voice you have for the generation you are in, to just bring in an enlightenment and an awareness that is just as real, that is just as transformational. And, you know, you're right. You can't see in something someone else what doesn't exist within you. So, you know, the light in me honors the light in you. And thank you just as much for the beautiful work that you do in the world and for inviting me here today. I've loved speaking with you.
Thank you. It's been such an honor. So let's get to the last question. What is one thing that you would suggest to our listeners to do to live their everyday lives better?
I think the big thing is to manage your expectations. I think the secret to a happy life is to lower your expectations, even lower and even lower than that, because we put unbearable pressure on ourselves to meet an expectation of ourselves, never mind everybody else's expectations of us. So to start living a more real, more enjoyable, more fulfilled life, it's like you have got to step away from the huge weight of expectation that is on you, because the pain you feel is always in direct proportion to the size of the expectation.
Sure.
So if you want less pain in your life, have less expectations.
Brilliant answer. I am going to do that, and I'm going to adopt that, because that is true. I just had my own aha moment, like Oprah. It's like, yes, that is so true. That is so true. Leah, what a pleasure. You are such a light. You're such a radiant woman. And where can people get to know you better? Where can they purchase your book? We'll put all the links in the description, but I'd love for you to just share all of that so that people can connect with you.
Oh, thank you. So I'm on all the social platforms: Facebook, Instagram. I'm at Leah Sefor, so that's LeahSefor. So at Leah Sefor on Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. I've got my YouTube channel that you can find, and my website is leahsefor.com. And all my bookings, all of my information is on my website. My book, you can get at Exclusive Books. You can get at all the major bookshops in South Africa. You can get it online. You can get the ebook version from Amazon. So for any internationals listening, only the ebook is available internationally at the moment. So and you can get it online from Takealot, from Zoom. So yeah, you can get it any good bookshop around South Africa.
Brilliant. That's not what I meant by Leah Sefor. We need to get that book. I need to get that book. Thank you so much for your time. It was an honor speaking with you. Thank you so much for tuning into this episode and taking the time to invest in yourself and in your future. If you loved this episode, be sure to share it with us by leaving a positive review or tagging us in a post or in your stories. Share one thing that stood out or inspired you to live your everyday life better. This helps us create more meaningful episodes for you to enjoy. If you're not already following us on social media, be sure to follow @LifeKraft for more inspiration and tools to help you live your most powerful life. And remember, you always have the power to craft a better life for yourself, and we are here to help you do just that. We'll connect again in the next episode, and until then, keep creating a life that you're excited to wake up to. We enjoy bringing you interviews from experts and everyday people so that they can talk about their experiences and share information, tips, and what has worked for them on their journey towards a better life. However, remember that the opinions or advice of our guests and myself, the host, should not be taken as personal, actionable advice and is given as general information and education only. Please always remember to consult a qualified professional before implementing any medical, financial, legal, or other advice that you believe might work for you. LifeKraft is not responsible nor liable for your decision when implementing anything you hear on the podcast. Please listen and act responsibly. The opinions of our guests do not represent the opinions or views of LifeKraft or Melissa Lane personally and are meant as information and general education only. Education only. Education only. Education only. Education only.